With a murderous father and a mother on the run, Apichai Ongwisit was a troubled and neglected child left to his own devices. That torment would never leave him, and as he grew older, he would follow in his father's footsteps to become a violent killer. Due to his father's previous actions, the Ongwisit residence already had somewhat of a reputation as the House of Horrors. But neighbours had no idea that these rumours were in fact shadowed by reality. And as it turns out, decades later, dark and terrible stories were still happening behind closed doors. Today, we're diving into the so-called Khae House of Horrors. We're inspecting the strange man known as Apichai Ongwisit, and we're looking at least one of his many victims. But first, we must learn some horrendous truths. Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're looking at the dark case of Apichai Ongwisit, also known as the Ice Casket Killer. If there ever was a place haunted by murders, then this definitely is one of them. With multiple deaths spanning several decades, it is no wonder why people see this place as the House of Horrors. Before we begin, and just to let you know that Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories, and the best way to support me is by subscribing to the channel. So, if you like darkly fascinating stories or simply want to see coffee rain from the sky, please hit subscribe now. And also, if you like to drink coffee while watching these videos, then please check out Classified Coffee, it's my very own blend. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee, pull up a seat and get ready for the deep dive. This is the case of Apichai Ongwisit. Sawadee krap, folks, and welcome to another story from Thailand. Well known as a tropical paradise, this country often finds us focusing on its many vibrant islands, surrounded by white sandy beaches and very clear blue seas. But in today's case, we'll be visiting the rainforest-covered mainland of the country instead. For this one, we're venturing to the outskirts of the country's capital city, Bangkok. Rather unsurprisingly, the area surrounding it also happens to be the most populous part of Thailand, with a whopping 23% of the population inside of its boundaries. This makes for a bustling metropolitan city of more than 14 million people, with hectic and busy roads often filled with mopeds and tuk-tuks and towering buildings. Interesting fact, but did you know that Bangkok is one of the most visited cities in the world, often filled to the brim with tourists eager to try out its delicious street food, browse the busy markets, and, of course, experience the vibrant nightlife. Saying that, while visiting this metropolitan powerhouse, it is quite wise to keep your wits about you, as in the West, the city is well known as a place where tourists are often taken advantage of. Various scams, overcharging and dual pricing are unfortunately somewhat commonplace here, with more than 10% of tourists claiming they'd experienced at least one of these scams. So, as with most things, if something seems too good to be true or isn't what you expected, then it's probably good to go with your instincts. Despite Bangkok's reputation as an urban jungle, there are a few inner districts which hold plenty of vegetation. And in the district of Bang Khae, a sizable plot of land with a large house complete with a tropical garden could be found. And this is where we find 41-year-old Apichai Ongwisit. Apichai inherited this property from his father more than a couple decades ago. His father, Apichai Ongwisit, was the owner and founder of the now-defunct Ongwisit market in Bangkok, which, by the way, is now defunct for a very good reason. Dark details aside, we'll get to that in just a moment. Otherwise, as previously hinted, markets are a very big deal in Bangkok. And having been there a couple of times myself, let me tell you that you can find pretty much anything and everything here. It's a place filled with treasure, excitement, and chaos. And so it's no surprise that the Ongwisit family had become rather wealthy through their business. Apichai had grown up on the Bang Khae property alongside his mother, father, and younger sister. And unlike others residing in this city, he never had to worry about money throughout his young childhood. However, the small family would only exist comfortably for a short while. And at a very young age, Apichai would sadly lose his entire family. On that note though, don't be too quick to extend your sympathies. His father was arrested in 1983 on suspicion of murdering a 12-year-old girl, to which eventually he would ultimately be found guilty. Now I could make a story on that case alone, but the short version is that, allegedly, Apichai's father lost his temper when the young girl broke one of his prized possessions, which only happened to be a large custom-built fish tank. Attempting to cover up his crime would be in vain, but this didn't stop him from trying. And it would be through very grisly efforts too, as Chaiyachet dismembered her body in the process. His wife, who of course was also Apichai's mother, played a large part in trying to cover up the murder too. I mean, with 2 children and a wealthy husband, she wanted to retain that lavish lifestyle. Once the news broke out, she was deemed complicit in the crime. But by the time officers had the chance to catch up with her, she'd already fled the country with Apichai's sister. And following this terrible whirlwind of a story, it left the young 4-year-old Apichai all alone in the big city of Bangkok. As a result, he was raised by distant relatives who seemed neither loving nor attentive. Apichai was essentially left to his own devices, and was often seen wandering the streets alone. Moving forward, we don't actually know much about Apichai's upbringing, but what we do know is that his father didn't last long in prison. In fact, before he was even sentenced, he was both shot and killed. With his father now dead and both his mother and sister gone, Apichai was left to inherit the entire family property. And as soon as he became a legal adult, this is where he would live for the rest of his life. Though, due to his father's horrible crime, the property had gained a local reputation of being known as the House of Horrors. Ironically, little did they know that this reputation would somewhat eventually manifest into reality. Now, as you may know, Thailand is well known for its entertainment industry. And yes, I can hear your saucy monologue talking, because I am in fact referring to its adult entertainment sector. In fact, Thailand has one of the highest sex tourism rates in the world. And although by law, things like prostitution are illegal, it is widely accepted that these things still take place behind closed doors. And with it bringing in substantial tourism and money to the country, authorities do tend to turn a blind eye. There are massage parlors, saunas, and hourly hotels where you can get more salacious services. Sometimes these women are simply mere hostesses, to which men pay them for their conversation, light entertainment, and to keep their drinks flowing. Sadly though, there is an even darker side to this industry. And of course, I'm talking about the world of drugs. Apichai was well aware of this. In fact, his main source of active income was the distribution of various drugs. He specialized in various pills, most notably that being methamphetamine. Although this is a life-threatening way to make money, it actually suited Apichai perfectly. He was very accustomed to the dark underbelly of Bangkok, and had many connections. Interesting side note, but his special formula was actually to mix caffeine into the methamphetamine. Now, this is starting to sound like the ultimate coffeehouse crime. Alongside his so-called business, Apichai also relied on the industry for his physical needs too. You see, due to his possessive and abusive nature, he always scared off potential partners. He wanted someone to belong to him, but not to stay loyal himself, and he practiced this double standard in rather abusive ways. In fact, in December of 2018, he ordered a woman to follow him home at gunpoint, but thankfully she was able to flee before it was too late. But Apichai was able to escape the law. In Thailand, money talks, and he was able to bribe the victim with $500,000 baht, which is the equivalent of $14,000 or £11,000. Of course, this was a high price for the drug dealer. Lucky for Apichai, he eventually ended up convincing her to accept a settlement fee 5 times lower, ending up at the sum of 100,000 baht, the equivalent of £2,000 or $2,700. Moving forward, his close run-in with the law would not stop him from his frequent visits to hostess bars. He was in regular contact with plenty of women to suit his needs, and one of those he favoured was 22-year-old Warinthorn Chaiyachet, who happens to be a very important person to our case today. Affectionately known as Kukik, Warinthorn grew up in a rural part of Thailand and was raised by her loving grandmother from a very young age. By the year 2019, she had moved to Bangkok to work at a hostess bar, with the money going towards looking after her children. Since she had broken up with her former husband, the family didn't have much income, and this job was the difference between a roof over their heads and homelessness. Sadly, this isn't an uncommon occurrence in many countries around the world. So, when the wealthy Apichai Ongwisit expressed a liking to Kukik, she was more than happy to take him on as her client. The pair spent hours in host clubs, both drinking and getting to know each other, and eventually, they began to spend time together at his residence. She would often stay the night too, which does suggest that their relationship had progressed into the bedroom. And furthermore, it did look like Apichai was able to form a one-sided relationship with her. Whether she enjoyed his company or not, we will never actually know, but either way, the situation situation worked well for both of them. However, not long into their arrangement, she would find out the hard way that inheriting his father's money was not his only source of income. Apichai did not only deal meth, he was also a user himself, which unfortunately would eventually influence Kukik to try it out with him. This arrangement would go on for a few months together, and over time, Apichai became more and more possessive of her, and to make sure that she wasn't seeing any other man, he would often make her stay at his place most nights. Although Kukik still worked at hostess spas, she omitted any form of other favourable service, which of course would make her other clients rather frustrated. But in July of 2019, she would confess to Apichai that someone had assaulted her. Now, although she did file a report to the authorities, she didn't know or recognise the man, and so, unfortunately, it looked like he'd gotten away scot-free. That would be until the next month of August 2019, when, all of a sudden, she stopped responding to all police correspondence. In fact, she stopped responding to everybody, including her family. And so, with much worry and fear, after a few days of silence, they reported her as missing. But unfortunately, with working in the adult industry, the police seemed to be rather sluggish in taking her case seriously. Sadly, this industry comes with many cases of assault and homicide, and with it intentionally being kept in the shadows, it can be quite hard to convict someone of a crime. Detectives kept the case open, but very little progress was made in trying to locate Kukik. I mean, without knowing that Apichai was connected to her disappearance, where could they even start? That would be until January of 2020, when all of a sudden an unexpected source would blow the case wide open, shining the spotlight on a very horrific discovery. In the early month of 2020, Bangkok police were called to an abandoned industrial zone. Following a tip, they had learned that an infamous local drug dealer named Chalamchion Ngabua was working in the area. Now, in Thailand, drug-related offences can come with a very severe punishment. In fact, dealing with so-called Category 1 drugs can even hold the death penalty. Chalamchion was a well-known miscreant renowned for his under-the-table jobs, petty run-ins with the law, and significant involvement in the drug industry. So, after successfully locating and arresting him, you can likely guess that he was willing to say or do anything he could in order to reduce his sentence. And of course, this would include bribery. You see, Chalo Emchion claimed that he used to be a security guard at the Ongwisit residence, and this intrigued officers greatly. They had long wanted to incriminate Apichai for his involvement in the drug industry, and not only was Chalemchion willing to provide this evidence, but apparently he had something much bigger to reveal too. In short, he told the authorities that he could offer up crucial evidence in an ongoing murder case in exchange for a weaker sentence, and this was an offer that officers could simply not refuse. Rumour had it that if they were to visit Apichai's property and dig in a specific spot, they would find the remains of a young woman. Chalo Emchion claimed that he knew she was there, because he was the one to help bury her body on Apichai's orders. He further told the officers that he personally believed there may be more victims underground. And so, on January the 9th, 2020, police made their way over to Bangkok's House of Horrors. Following the concerning information, Apichai was detained as soon as officers stormed the property, catching him naked as they began to search the residence. Forensics began to dig near the large pond, as instructed by Chalo Emchion, and sadly, this is where they came across a chilling yet strange discovery. A large metal box was uncovered, and after dismantling the casket, they discovered the remains of a young woman. She was wrapped in clothes, a bedsheet, and a black plastic bag. With a large tattoo spread across her back, she was identified as 22-year-old Warinthorn Chaiyachet. Following this discovery, authorities now had reasonable grounds to formally arrest Apichai for the murder of Kukik. But despite this evidence laid before him, he viciously denied his involvement. The horror would not end there, however, because following Chalemchi Chaiyachon's testimony, authorities were now worried there may be more victims underneath. As a result, a thorough search of his property was conducted, with the large pond being their main area of interest. Horrifyingly, over the next few days, police and volunteer divers discovered more dark secrets around the pond. A total of 298 human bones were recovered from its murky waters, all of which seemed to belong to young women. They would also recover various heavy objects, including gates, dumbbells, and cement blocks, all of which could be used to sink these women to their watery graves. In addition to all of this, detectives found another metal casket in the water, and after opening it up, they found the decaying body of a woman. With such horrific details, this case understandably became talk of the town. In fact, the entire city of Bangkok was stunned. As the news spread, some believed that Apichai filled the pond with carnivorous fish named alligator gar to help dispose of the bodies. I mean, I had no idea what alligator gar were until I looked them up, and let me tell you, they look like something straight out of a horror movie. Quite frankly, I don't know what would be worse, seeing Apichai as the last thing on earth before you die, or one of those things. Although the authorities claimed that no carnivorous fish were found in the pond, it doesn't negate the horrors discovered within its murky depths. And although they may never be able to identify the blackened and washed out human bones, through forensic analysis, they were able to confirm that some of those bones belonged to a 17-year-old girl and another one slightly younger. The one victim that could be named was Warinthorn Chaiyachet, and through witness testimonies, physical evidence, and Apichai's own partial confessions, we can piece together an accurate story of what precisely happened to Khae in August of 2019. Despite Apichai denying that he murdered her, he did eventually admit that she was accidentally killed. It turns out that, after growing scared that she might run off with other men, he held her captive for several days. This allegedly broke into a heated argument between the two, and after standing up for herself, Khae declared that she wanted to end the relationship and rekindle her relationship with her previous husband. Menacingly though, Apichai was not going to let that happen. I have no idea why he had one of these things, but with the fear of being abandoned, he grabbed her by the arm and forced her into a metal casket which was found in his bedroom, locking her inside. Here she remained for the entire night. But what Apichai supposedly failed to realize is that the metal casket was airtight. As a result, Khae tragically died of suffocation, and by the time Apichai released her the following morning, she was already dead. Apichai's story didn't seem to free him of any guilt, and, if anything, just seemed to be his own way of shrugging off that guilt of killing someone. But upon further investigation and a statement from Chaiyachet, it became very apparent that Apichai's story was not truthful. Warinthorn's autopsy concluded that she had suffered several broken ribs, which resulted in a collapsed chest cavity, which was very different from Apichai's story. Chaiyachet had also claimed that those injuries were from an iron rod, which Apichai had used against her before tying her wrists and ankles and putting her in the casket. According to Chaiyachet, he himself had no idea that she was locked inside the casket until the next day, when he was offered money to help dispose of the casket and her body. And needing that extra cash, he regrettably decided to accept the job. Apichai hoped that nothing would ever come to light. After all, many women in Thailand's adult industry go missing every single day. But now, as we all know, his luck had finally run out. And he wouldn't face prosecution on just murder charges alone, as the authorities were sure to extensively search his home for drugs. So, do you remember the caffeinated methamphetamine he was distributing? Well, more than 1,000 yaba pills were confiscated from his property, and with these pills containing methamphetamine and caffeine, those pills are sure to fuck you up. No surprise, but yaba translates to crazy medicine in Thai. It's classed as a Category 1 drug in Thailand, meaning that the punishment for producing such a drug could mean the death penalty. However, since he was only found to possess yaba pills, and there was no evidence of producing them on his property, he was less likely to face lethal injection and more likely to face life behind bars. Throughout court proceedings, Apichai changed his story multiple times. One moment, he claimed that Khae died from suffocation, and the next, it was apparently drug overdose. And when her DNA was found on the dumbbell, Apichai claimed it had fallen on her during the argument. One thing is for certain though, it is confirmed that Khae suffered blunt force trauma before she passed away, which is something that Apichai denies. The local media would eventually dub Apichai as the Metal Casket Killer, and upon more thorough investigations, detectives would realise that several people around Apichai disappeared during his time at large. This included friends, girlfriends, and even prostitutes. Sadly though, with the DNA condition so poor, any analysis conducted on it could not determine if those people were in fact the ones he'd buried. Which is kind of terrifying if you think about it, because we don't actually know how many people Apichai murdered. I mean, he's almost certainly a serial killer, but it can't be confirmed. As a result, he could only be charged with one murder, despite the overwhelming evidence that he had likely killed countless others. Having said that, with Apichai behind bars and his charges so severe, it was almost certain that he was to spend the rest of his life behind bars. So, although his other victims couldn't be identified, this likely wouldn't have affected his time incarcerated either way. The real pain here rests with those families out there who still have a missing relative. Those families who will never receive the closure they deserve. But the one family who could seek closure from this case was Kukik's family. Distraught by the news, they actually demanded compensation for their grief. A demand that was fortunately granted. As a matter of compensation for their grief and to help cover funeral costs, Kukik's mother and brother both received a collective 2.9 million baht, which is equal to $80,000 or £65,000. 1 year after the chilling discovery, Apichai Ongwisit finally stood trial on charges of murder, drug possession, and sexual assault with the aid of a firearm. Multiple witnesses testified against him, with his own family refusing to come forward in his defense. One of his ex-girlfriends also took to the stand. She told the court about his controlling nature, his abusive tendencies, and his physically violent temperament. And the woman he assaulted and then bribed in 2019 now felt safe to testify against him, further reducing his chance for sympathy from the judge. With the overwhelming amount of evidence stacked against him, no witnesses or testimonials in his favour, and the very real prospect of receiving the death penalty, Apichai Ongwisit pleaded guilty to the murder of Warinthorn Chaiyachet. Despite his guilty plea though, he denied any other charges. But thankfully, in January 2021, the judge would overturn this and find him guilty of all charges against him. As a result, he was given 25 years for drug possession, 11 years for assault, and a life sentence for murder, only narrowly missing the death penalty. Now, I don't really believe in this saying, as I've seen plenty of people come out better or worse than their parents. But some say the apple never falls far from the tree. Well, in this story it really applies, because Apichai really did follow after his murderous father, and they both believed they'd get away with it. Both were foolishly overconfident about themselves too, but thankfully weren't actually that smart. At least now, Kukik's family have received both compensation and closure for their loss, but in sad reality, neither of these two things come even close to the pain that they have suffered. As for the community surrounding Bang Khae, many believe that the Ongwisit residence, which has now seen countless murders, is absolutely haunted. And Apichai may as well join the list of ghosts in the property, because with him now forever behind bars, he is essentially good as dead. Anyway folks, that covers our story today. Thank you so much for being here for another video today by Coffeehouse Crime. So, what are your thoughts on this case? To begin with, do you think Apichai is in fact a serial killer? Do you think he's capable of being one? And with all those disappearances happening around him, do you think he is responsible? Whatever your thoughts are, please leave them down below. I honestly appreciate comments and I do try and get through all of them. A big thank you to everyone who's bought classified coffee, by the way. If you are interested in grabbing a bag, then please check the link down below. Furthermore, if you want to get early access to my videos, additional content, Q&As, or simply more casual videos from me, please check out my Patreon. And on top of that, if you want to see more about me or Nero and our lives, then please check out my social media. And yeah, I think that's the end of the video, folks. Thank you so much for watching today, and as always, I'll see you again very soon for another video. Until that moment arrives though, remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and of course, stay safe. Thank you, and goodbye.